Hi everyone, welcome back. We are on our final discussion of going through BardSkull. The book is obviously a lot longer than just 5 conversations that we had on our channel, but we're hoping that some of these sparked something in you and you've grabbed a copy of the book, maybe even grabbed a t-shirt. There's going to be a link in the description for our take, our riff on the book, and we're hoping that you've enjoyed these conversations. So we have a story today that Mary's going to read through, and then I have 2 short selections, and that will be our closing for this. And at the end of this episode, we'll let you know what it is that we plan on reading next. And well, we think you're going to love it. And if you haven't read it, you're definitely going to love it. So, Mary, the selection that you have today, would you like to take it away?
Sure, yes. So this is a section from the second book or chapter of BardSkull. I realize this sickly reverie about Elena is something to do with how to talk with my own soul. Surely that is part of this vigil? That at this time in my life, it is likely only the wolf in me the soul trusts enough to talk to. The rest is too florid, too public. Wait, that is a big thought. I have to think it again. It's only the wolf in me my soul trusts enough to talk to. Rather wolf's truthful danger than the sleepy breeze of another false suitor. I don't pretend to know what Elena quite is, but then we're not meant to know. She can't be franchised. I realize I am trying to get at least a momentary glimpse of this soulfulness, a shy audience, and the intelligence it brings. A shimmer, not a sharpness. But the rain is beating me back today. The coming night is beating me back. Thorny Ridge is beating me back. So my soul wants to talk to him. So my wolf wants to talk to my soul, and my soul is currently a sleeping girl, just so you know. I had to be poisoned to meet my soul, and I am in every arrow. I erupt and diverge, I erupt and diverge, I erupt and diverge into the incredible. And then he stops there.
What do you make of that line, Mary? The what is it? The wolf wants to speak to the wolf in me, or my soul. What was that line again? That's really intriguing.
It's only the wolf in me, my soul, trusts enough to talk to. And then it says, so my wolf wants to talk to my soul, and my soul is currently a sleeping girl. So there's like 2 different parts there.
Yeah.
I think they get a little bit of a hint. The part right after it where it says that rather wolf's truthful danger than the sleepy breeze of another false suitor. Um, I think maybe Martin Shaw might. One of the things I thought is just that the wolf is more honest. The wolf doesn't have all these layers of pretension that we put on as human beings, and or that we take on from other people. Um, it's just kind of more real in a certain sense. It's not pretending to be anything else. Um,
Mhm.
but I love thinking about what this means to the soul and how it's like a woman and this have to go to the edge of the wild to find it in the story. Um, I think like I've been reading this book, The Body Keeps the Score, about like trauma. And it said that like one of the therapies they had, they talk about how like when you have experienced a trauma, your soul can like is becomes like different social entities, different has different parts, but there's always a part that is protected and preserved and pure, and is always there, even if it seems like all the other parts have gone and mixed up. There's like this essential soul that's self, they call it, but
Mhm.
and I wonder if that's like what he's talking about here too. Is the part of us that is the most like God, the part that's made in the image and likeness of God, is there. That's what I thought.
Yeah. What do you think, Gabby? Anything go through your mind?
Yeah, so I was actually noticing some motifs that we had from past talks. We were talking about the wolf, which when we were having that discussion, I remember that at least on my end, I was interpreting that as this connection to your body, but not necessarily the polished body, the body that we try to get ready for Instagram or for the camera or whatever, or even just to
Yeah.
look good for other people, just the honest, hairy, sweaty, blood and teeth bodies that we have that even Jesus had. And then he was talking about how that is what talks to the soul. And so I was just rethinking of that really tight connection that our body and soul have to each other. So like the soul only wants to talk to the body because our soul is ours and that's it. It's not, you know, inserting itself into anything or anyone else. It can make connections. It can know something in a way, but there's this unrepeatable connection between our soul and our body. And that's kind of special. It's
Yeah.
just super special. And then I was thinking about when he said that the body was, or I'm sorry, the soul was a sleeping girl. I was thinking about the Sleeping Beauty story that he told, which is where, she goes into the castle and the thorns grow around. But that's then when the witch tells her how to be really fully alive. And, the thorns are just us kind of like pushing out. Okay, don't, no, I'm not worried about what everybody thinks. I'm not worried about what people are telling me to do. I'm going to learn what it means to be really, really fully alive. And so then I was thinking that to the body. So the soul learning to be really fully alive is then telling the body how to be really fully alive, and the body, which is grounded and it's unpretentious, like you said, Mary, that is then in return telling the soul, hey, here's my unjudging, unpretentious self so that you can learn to be alive. And it's this lovely symbiotic cycle.
Mhm. What do you think,
That was
Mary? You're smiling
great.
there.
I love that. I hadn't even thought about it, but you're right. The wolf's kind of like the body half, and then Elena's like the soul. So of course they go together perfectly in a human.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
There's I like this so the little that I know about how do you call it? Carl Jung and Jungian philosophy, right? And how he talks about the role of the shadow, right? And the shadow is everything in you that you basically ignore. So when you construct your idea of who you are, and you tweeze that thing to perfection to be able to navigate every day and a job and a family and somebody you can quite comfortably fall asleep as and wake up as, and you feel good about yourself. And then the shadow is everything that you're ignoring because it doesn't fit, you don't know how to deal with it, nobody told you about it, nobody guided you on how to integrate it, and it's all the rest of you that's literally outside the field of your vision. And it's the kind of thing that I think a lot of us equate all of our dark and evil desires to being part of the shadow, and therefore I have to kill my shadow, I have to get rid of, and I have to crush, and I have to, as if I have a complete understanding of what it means to be me as a person, as a human, like at all. And well, psychologists and heck, priests, heck, parents looking down at kids are like, yeah, you think you know what you are at, 9 years old, 11 years old. You're still just beginning this whole thing about life. There's a lot in you that we call potential that, you think you've got it all figured out. You don't. But it's all this stuff that it's either you're not ready for or you haven't faced yet because you're functionally still a child, you're still learning, you're still developing, you're still growing. And that's why we go to therapy, because it's just stuff I can't see. I need somebody's loving attention, or a friend, maybe not a therapist, or, I need somebody else's loving attention to walk around and talk through the stuff that I can't see, because on my own, I can't make myself see it. And so characterizing all of that as a wolf really intrigues me. And I don't know if he intends this. I'm just going to paraphrase or share my thoughts. Right, when we call something a shadow, it's meant to be, I think, what Jung would say. It's the thing that stretches away from you, outside of your field of vision. Like you're facing into the sun. You're looking to where the sun goes, and the shadow is like everything behind you. You don't orient yourself running into your shadow necessarily. You're following where the light leads you, right? And of course that's the problem, because that's all the missed opportunity. That's all the undeveloped, unconscious parts of you. And then if you don't pay attention to that, if you starve that, what doesn't happen is that it goes away and it sort of desiccates and dwindles and fades into nothing. It becomes the Hulk, and it gets bigger and madder and angrier because it's an unaddressed part of who you are as a human person. And you're not supposed to be sidelining essential aspects of what it means to be as a human. This is, I think, one reason why you get something like different cultures around the world, because different cultures prioritize different engagements with partitions of the human. If you're imagining a human diagram and you are the totality of a circle, right? Well, you can't focus on everything all at once. And so what do is you pick like, okay, this quadrant or this 30%, and I'm going to focus on this, right? A full adult would be someone who begins to recognize, oh, there's more to the picture here, and I need to learn to detach, calm down, disidentify, become more self-aware, right? That's the kind of thing an actual grown-up does. But I think you find different cultures around the world for multiple reasons. But one of them is because this is what we all agree is good and acceptable together. And then you go to another country, and then they've shifted that view to another section of the circle. And you're like, oh my gosh, you barbarous inhuman beings, So calling it a wolf intrigues me, right? Because he has this line, I don't know if we've actually covered it, but he says, we crawl in and out of animals all our lives, right? He's making this reference to something that happens in the book where he goes to this ancient, we did read this. He goes to this ancient hill fort, I think it was, and there he finds it's freezing and it is raining, and there is, for some weird reason, or maybe some magical intended reason, there's a deer that has died on the steps or in the center of this fort. And he is freezing in this rain, and it's thundering and storming, and he is way too far from home. And so he pulls a Luke Skywalker and he crawls inside the thing to get warm. And in so doing, it's what kicks off this journey, this realization. Things start to waken and come to life in him. The deer, he begins to realize, has an actual message for him. The wolf, in his heritage and in the world around him, has a message for him. And it's everything that he has forgotten or was never cultivated in him, that he had to be aware of. So I think all of that to say, the soul trusts talking to the wolf because it's everything else that has an unbridled, unlimited sort of amount of power. It's what bubbles up in especially anger, I think, but also almost any of the desires that you have. They're not emerging out of, I consciously choose this thing this day, and I am, I'm in love with this thing. It's like, this is one thing that always fascinates me about discovering a passion for something. It's quite literally a discovery. You don't decide, I have 6 options, this one is just going to do it. It's like you just wake up and you see it in the shop window or it comes across your feed, and there is a surge in your soul that goes, this is a reflection of my inner life, and I love this, and I want to identify with this. I want this thing in my environment or on my body, or I want to be able to see this thing because this is me. And I didn't even know it until this thing showed up. For me personally, I'm quite frankly like, what else is out there in creation that could reveal me to myself that I don't yet know about, So that's kind of the adventure of like getting out and discovering and meeting and talking to other people and seeing and learning things. I'm going a bit long, but that line just particularly fascinates me because the hardest thing to get to is a conscious thinking person, because we have very clear ideas of what it means to be me. And I think a great example of this is like these shows Married at First Sight or Love is Blind, right? Where they take these 2 semi-random people and then they decide, you 2 would be good fits. You're going to meet on this day, and then you're going to be legally married for a 30-day period or a 60-day period.
Oy.
And then at the end, you can choose to get a divorce if you choose. But the point would be, can you get a crash course in what it's like to be a married human being? Well, there are some people who are phenomenal, and there are some people who are just mediocre and boring as anything. And I wish that what they could almost do to these people, right? Because what do these people do? As soon as they get into these things, is they start negotiating, they start trying to be themselves. They think that they're amazing. They don't want to change for anybody else. And so the marriages collapse and break down because, 2 people having a conversation and there's 4 actual conversations happening because none of these people can get out of their own egos. And I half wish that you could take the couple, drop them on a desert island with a backpack and go survive for 2 weeks. You'll actually get to meet each other through a dramatic shared experience.
That I would watch.
Yeah, why are they not doing that?
I mean, a real
Why are they
marriage
not
will absolutely do that to you. You get a chance to actually really meet each other. Darn it,
Because
I
like you
forgot
said,
where I
you
was
just
going with
get out
that.
of your own head. Because I
Yeah.
struggle with that a lot. Like I'm in my own head. I'm trying to make sure I'm putting on this, and I don't even want to call it a face because it's not like I'm trying to ever be disingenuous. I'm just trying to do what I think is supposed to be right. And it fails
Mhm.
utterly. Like it always
Yeah.
just messes me up, and then I'm stressed, and then I'm actually sabotaging myself because then I'm thinking of all the things that I should not do, and then I'm either doing those things or I'm thinking about those
Mhm.
things, and those things are making me nervous, and it's a big hot mess. And then when I
Mhm.
finally get out of my own head and I'm like, okay, God, look, I'm just gonna kind of roll, and you do your thing, please. And then just the weight is off my shoulders and everything comes so much more naturally, and it's not, well, like I've said so many times before, it's not sucking the life out of you, it's bringing life to you. And then when you're
Mhm.
not thinking about you so much, then you can really tap into what God is giving you in this moment, which in the case of your awesome reality show idea would be just survive. Just get across the desert island. Don't try and be a thing because you're going to be
Mhm.
married for 60 days on the camera. That's very polished. That's not very wolfish. That's not very furry. We need to
Well,
get back to the
exactly. It's
birds.
not it's not actually real. It's what you think is real. And that's why the soul
Right.
can't ever really talk to it. And so the soul goes through your back door and tries to light you up with like, oh look, you love this thing? Or it's like a group of people on a hike and all of a sudden you're transfixed by a common experience and it's like your mind, your attention, your consciousness wasn't actually even like there. It's like it's almost like the really beautiful and important things in life. They always sneak up on you, like holding your child for the first time. And
Yeah.
it's like I did not expect the the world shift that would happen, the world tilt that happened at the altar marrying my wife, or learning how to get a job and what the kind of person I needed to become to like hold the work and level myself up and stuff. These are things you can only do through experiencing them. Mary, I really want to know what you're thinking because I know you're nodding. And the thing about being in a cloister, right, being a nun, is this is specifically a kind of person who's like trying to get off the carousel, get off the merry-go-round of life, and become they're like spiritual specialists to really try to pay attention to like more of what it means to be a human person.
Yeah, that's what formation is really.
Yeah.
During those first few years. And it starts off like what Gabriella was saying, like when you're a postulant and you're like think you know what you're doing. You're like kind of pretending like I know how to be a sister. I know what this is really about. I know, I just gotta pray and and like you think you understand yourself, but the farther you get into it and the deeper you get into the silence, like they say, it's like a
Mhm.
submarine going down to the bottom of the ocean. Um, the novice year is the second year of
Mhm.
the novitiate of that formation, and it's like going down to the bottom, and you can see it on the novice's face. Everyone's like, you're like, I have to look at myself, like my real self. I've
Yeah.
never even talked to this person before. I didn't know they were here, and all these things come up. But like, if I hadn't had that time to just stop, um, there are things that I never would have had the chance and wouldn't have known about. For me, it was mostly like this, a lot of healing.
Mhm.
I had chronic back pain even when I entered, and it kept getting worse and worse. And nothing, I didn't have any of the coping mechanisms that I used to have because I was in the convent, so I had a very tight, rigid routine. I couldn't keep running from it anymore. Um, and so I learned to I start meeting with a counselor there in the convent and talking about how I had been squashing all my darker feelings, maybe my wolfish feelings, I guess you could say, like the ones you were talking about, the anger and desire and anything negative. I actually couldn't even feel it.
Oh
But
wow.
when I was there, I started to feel them again. I couldn't even remember what they were from
Mhm.
because they were so old. But like, I worked with God and with the counselor and the Holy Spirit and gave it over. And um, for me, I found in the convent, but I really hope other people can find it in other ways too.
Mhm.
Um, I could finally be at peace with myself. And then it wasn't until I could start really feeling all my emotions, even the ones that I thought were bad or like shadows, I guess you could say, like we're talking about this. that I ever really felt very close and intimate to Jesus, which is the whole reason why I had gone. I couldn't be close to him until I was feeling my whole world around me. So
Wow.
that's why I always talk about feelings, not because I'm like a super touchy-feely kind of person, but because you can't have an intimate relationship with God or with other people unless you can be fully in line and unless you can fully experience what your body is telling you through your feelings.
I can second that, and you were talking about finding it outside of the convent, like, I obviously don't know exactly what your process was like, but, like, what you were describing is something similar, just that there was a thing chaos, jeepers, just chaos that happened this past year, and I still don't love the fact that it all happened, but I'm just really grateful because throughout this process, I kind of was just like, "That's it, I'm done." This all kind of so much. I'm dealing with so much nonsense that I'm not going to try and be this polished, numb, like you were saying, because it's polished so like a wolf, they're in the cold and they're hunting and they've got the forest under their feet. They feel everything, but the polished bit, that's numb, like you were saying. And so, I was for a while, for a
It's not
long
real.
it's not real at all. So for a long while, I was trying to do that tamping down, the stifling, the numbing bit, and I thought it was working fine, but then finally this thing happened where I was like, "That's it, I'm done. I can't stifle this anymore and try and deal with this." And there was so much releasing going on over those months and months and months and months and months. And I am telling you, God did some healing in there.
Oh,
He did and like so that at this point now, I'll like something will happen that a while ago I would have made some like huge deal out of. It would have been this inner turmoil trying to figure out, did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? And now it's not that anymore. There's just so much peace. And so I just have to thank God, like, wow, this was a leap. Like, this is completely different to let the emotion, let the wolf out. Like, because I remember days where this thing was happening and I would just sit down on my bed after just being furious all day. And then I would just cry. I was just like, ugh. And then my mom was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just letting it out because I need it out." And then it was better. And now I am, I don't know. God did stuff. So
Oh, that's
there's my story.
beautiful. I like that. Let the wolf out.
Yes.
Because he
Yeah.
doesn't go away. None
Mm-mm.
of those feelings. I didn't realize this. If you repress your feelings, all of them stay in you, and then
Mhm.
they don't go away unless you release them.
Yep.
They never go away, and then they
At
just
all.
start up
Do
showing
you ever
up
have
as
those
like
those stress
problems.
balls, where you squeeze it and they come out through your fingers and then you
Yeah.
poke it back in, it comes out the other side and like
Yes.
same sort of thing. Like we guys are we have especially in this area of things, we have severe cultural, handicaps. Like what you
Mhm.
just said there, Gabby, right? I cried because I knew I needed to let it out. That was something intuitive that, you had. I don't know of any men I've ever talked to where they realized I had a crap day at work and sitting with a bottle of Maker's Mark in the shower in my full clothes is not an appropriate response to handling, dealing with my problems. Not that I've done that, but um,
Hey, no judgment.
so bringing it home a little bit, you talked to Mary about we need to. It's not the value and the beauty of a religious convent, right, or a monastery or religious order is that they're trying. It's my take on it. You're trying to fast track the process. Like you could figure this out by life, kind of sort of beating it into you, like. Or you could step away from banging your head against the wall and decide maybe I should use the door. And a religious specialist, a spiritual specialist, is like, let me do that and kind of because it's just the fastest human thing for me to maybe find some happiness and peace so that I can be of help to others. But we also start to model that. We people who are religious, that is the expectation. That's one way you do it, and why they are there for the rest of us is to help us begin to see what it could be like, and that's what modeling means, right? So, coming to writers, what goes through our minds like we're talking here about as being like actual humans trying to navigate and deal with this very strange idea, right? Which is at the same time just just very practical and very human. And yes, it's messy, but we're not talking about bad things. It's bad when it's like, as a child, you have no mastery over the wolf, no mastery over the anger, and so you need to say other members of your community to step in and barricade and help you navigate these incredibly powerful things going on inside you. If it's not done properly or carefully or something, you can end up with repression as opposed to mastery. Not to say that, most of us as parents are probably consigning our kids to a lifetime of repression. Sometimes you just can't do anything about that because the kids themselves, like we ourselves, had our part to play in how we decided to negotiate and handle these things. The task of like becoming a grown up, like an actual fully functioning adult, would be, okay, there's wounds here I need to, sit with or breathe over or unpick some stitching or something that nobody else could have protected me from this. This is actually just kind of a way how life is. Nothing's perfect. And so thinking about this as authors, dealing with characters, creating characters, this is why being a fiction author to me is such a vocation, because you're not only putting lots of attention into characters you really love. Frankly, these characters are partitions or aspects of us. And we're kind of used. That's why we spend 6 months, a year on a novel. Why? Because, there's like a sore tooth I've got in my soul, and I need to like tease it and nurture it and maybe yank it out or coax it or, try to see what the life is in there that's trying to push through. And then it just blooms in your brain, in your mind, as characters going through big adventures or small ones or very things that are very, very real. Little bit of a ramble, but help me make sense of this. What do you think, what's going through your mind with this idea of the soul wants to talk to the wolf to sort of get through to you? Being an author or dealing with characters, what thoughts go through your mind? Mary, what are you thinking?
I love that you're talking about like the characters being parts of ourselves, because I do think of that. Like my main characters, there are different aspects. Like Philia, the main character, she's like the innocent at the story, and she's like experiencing things for the first time. She begins to feel evil things the first time, and it's really hard for her, but she needs to, so she can become who she is. And then, yeah, sorry, there's so many things I could say. I definitely feel like there's a different part of me in each character, and I need to know how their story turns out too. It's not just for the reader or just for the sake of the story, but I write like a lot of characters in my next book have struggle with different mental illnesses, or and some of them are the ones that I've experienced myself. So when I'm writing, I'm trying to think, well, how, how are they going to cope with this? How am I going to cope with this in my own life? How can I possibly get free from it? Like, is there a way to become free? So yeah, I think those characters are more than just characters. They can, they're helping us to discover ourselves, and hopefully they can help other people too when they read it, to find answers too.
Yeah, so I was honestly thinking about how, to me, the books can sometimes be kind of like that. I just sat down on my bed and cried to get it out. Like, it's that outlet. It's that just pouring out of, okay, here's what I'm feeling. It's not pretty. It's not I'm gonna use the word polished again, but if you come up with a better word than that, tell me so I won't keep repeating myself. But it's just kind of the I don't want to call it ick, the wolf, this untamed, just fiery thing inside you that cannot just be suppressed. You let that out onto the page. You let the characters play things out. Like at least once a book, my characters always do something where the readers are like, ouch. Because there's always just this is what would have gone through my mind if I was in this situation. It's all like you said, it's always a little bit of a reflection of me. And I say things that I wish I hadn't said sometimes. I don't always make the greatest decisions. I mean, stuff happens. I'm me. And so just being able to admit to that, just kind of say, yeah, this is the truth. This is what I'm feeling. And of course, then being able to navigate it and find God's grace in it, because it's not meant to be just like a diary entry, uh where it's just like a dump of literally what I'm feeling. And it's also not meant to be just the the thing that you normally would repress. It's not meant to be there just to be there for then other people to like revel in, I guess, because sometimes it's like glorified, and it's like, well, that's not the point. That's not. There's nothing evil about the feelings, but they're also not something that is supposed to be the pinnacle. They're not supposed to be the thing that we return to. So being able to kind of just spit up all of this onto the page, and then through the story be able to find healing, or as you are finding healing, put it into the story. Because like the one I'm writing now, ending, it's kind of I kind of did this subconsciously, but it's a parallel to, I used to be very scrupulous. Like it was like, I I don't wanna call it a condition because obviously I wasn't diagnosed, but there was some, it was not good. I was not mentally in a good place for a while because I was so scrupulous. And then that was the main thing that has been so largely healed over this past, like, year and a half or so, which was part of that whole mess that I told you about. And so, as I'm now continuing to actually get into the drafting of ending, because I was writing it in my head a while before that, but now that I'm drafting it, I'm realizing, this is me again. This character is me, because ending, he he is supposed to be not necessarily only death itself, but death and night and things winding down. That's kind of his personification. And so he's so scared of touching anyone because he's scared that he's going to like slowly kill them if he touches them. And then as I'm writing that, I'm like, that sounds like me being so scrupulous, like scared to just do anything out of just very tight bounds because I'm afraid I'm going to do something wrong. And then now that I have come over this journey where God has healed that so immensely, now I can look at ending and be like, okay, boy, let's fix this. Let's see what you're actually scared of. Let's see how we can solve that. Let's see how we can get you from being afraid of touching people at the beginning to at the end where you really get to be more fully alive, you know?
Well, it
Beautiful.
sounds like you're finishing the book at just the right time.
Yay! God is good, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
That's cool. As you're talking, there's a thought that came to mind, which is wolf speaks to wolf within your characters, and you. And here's where I'm going with that. So I have been battling with my main character in writing this novel that I've been working on, and I finally got to the end of the novel. It's taken 120,000 words or something to actually start to understand what I'm doing at all with this, because I know I was being drawn by something that I loved and I couldn't let it go. And it was really fun and really cool. I'm not saying that every novel everybody writes is always going to be this level of deep, but I do think that a lot of the fun novels we write might be breaking the ice, to get you ready, perhaps, to discover the adventure that you're actually maybe being called to. Not everybody is. For those who are, I do think that the fun things that we do are breaking the ice, warming us up, getting us moving, making the limbs supple so that we can get ready for the actual task we're put here, because creatives are a specific kind of either a lighthouse or a beacon or a lightning rod for things to be communicated, like somebody who has a stellar voice or someone who is a singer, right? There's a bit of an oracle thing going on here. Well, this novel that I've been working on, it's so funny how day one I intuited the character, and then I decided, well, I know the kind of person she needs to be, and because she has to carry this whole massive story I want to tell. And then I tried to go and do what every responsible writer does and create a character sheet. And then she just literally folded her arms and sat down into my head, and the energy went away. And I could not make things work. And like, oh, come on. Okay, I obviously don't know you enough. Let me put you through a Myers-Briggs typing system. Let me get that printout of what kind of a person you are and how you would react to things. Oh, that didn't work? Crud. Let's try the Enneagram. Let me try the brand archetypes. Well, they would all sort of get close, but the moment I would try to craft this character as if she was a robot, basically following those patterns. She just stayed in the chair, with the dingy light swinging overhead in this dark room, going, "I'm not telling you anything."
I
And
want my lawyer.
I want my wolf. And
Says
I'm like,
I can't be franchised, right?
yeah, there you go. That was just, it was weird. And it took ages. And I ended up just continuing to write the scenes as I'd already kind of intuited them before I knew what I was doing with her character. And then last night I was actually driving home in the dark, and then a monologue that I realized she needs to go through or share right before she goes into the climax. Like, oh, I never thought of writing out her inner monologue. How dumb of me. I need to blah, blah, blah. Just wrote it all out as I was driving. Well, I spoke it all out. The microphone did the work. Why am I saying that? Because there's something in her that in this character, and I think that when characters like really mean something to us, and even when they like kind of mostly sort of mean something to us, there's a part to them that we can consciously understand, and then there's a part that we intuit. And the part that we only intuit is the wolf part. And the more we try to force them into saying things and doing the things that we want, we end up having to come back and rewrite those or take them out and stick them in a drafts folder because they don't feel true to the character for some weird reason, and we sort of feel why. And it's that feeling is that intuition. Again, why am I trying to say this? Wolf talks to wolf. The intuitive part of me that doesn't exactly know what I'm doing with this thing, but I feel called to be writing this story and engaging with this character and putting her through all sorts of pain and adventure and, maybe joy. There's something inside her that is also, she is not clear either. It's the wolf part of her. And it is actually, this is how every story we tell, isn't it? It's the wolf part of any character, the shadow part. Maybe it's not a wolf. It could be a horse for somebody or an eagle for somebody. It's kind of why I think we'll have these whole traditions of spirit animals, right? These things that you don't fully understand, but you identify with and you don't know why. It's
Yeah.
those things that are engaging with the story and with this adventure that you're on. Anyway, that's just an intriguing thought for me, the idea that my wolf is communicating or is in sync with the wolf in this character. And it takes a level of attention maybe to see, I could force this character to get through the story the way I want, but I don't think it'll work. And it's quite likely my readers will tell, my editor will tell, blah, blah, blah. So what happens if I try to be honest, with this? And there's a weird thought I did not have 100,000 words ago. So
It's good. Yes,
Awesome. I
please
love
be
that.
honest. That's the real story, right? The part that's a little scary and maybe doesn't quite fit into a neat box.
Yeah. By the way, Gabi, I love the way that you keep talking about the blood and bone and gristle of this stuff. Like it's very you, and you get the Shaw thing, and you're the one who's never read anything of him. Okay, I have a short selection here. We'll keep going about two little selections, and then we can wrap for today. All right, short little thing. He says, first we domesticated fire, then we domesticated animals, and then we domesticated myth. There's not much I can do about the first two. Dreaming is a very deep kind of thinking. So my commitment to this experience, about the whole book that he's writing, my commitment to this experience was to dream with my eyes wide open for 101 days, to undomesticate. I can do it to my imagining, my imagination, my imaginalis. So that's the selection. That line, the fact that the idea that we've domesticated myth, what goes through your minds? What do you think about that? Gabi, I'll pick on you.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking about how when you domesticate something, it becomes safer, but also massively less impressive. So, like fire, you have a wildfire, which obviously is a terrifying thing. I know the people in California are suffering immensely, and I'm praying for them. I feel so sorry for them. But I'm thinking more like a natural wildfire in the forest where it's meant to be there, where it pops the pine cones so that the seeds grow, and like a natural wildfire. It's huge. you can like, and you can hear it and you can feel the heat a mile away, and it's bright, and of course, again, it's not safe. It's still destructive. It's got destructive properties to it, but it's huge. And then you think about an animal. You got mustangs, you got wolves, you got wild cats. Again, not safe. Don't let your child around them. Don't let your child around them unattended. But there's something so much bigger and powerful about them. And then you get chihuahuas. You domesticate it, you get a little Pinot
Do
Grigio.
I sense a
Perfect
dislike?
example.
It's like Ken Ham and poodles.
So then I was just thinking, then mythology. You have this massive story. You have these stories, you have these pieces of our soul, these pieces of our soul reaching out for gods. You have our connections to the imaginal realm, where there's just like this piece of of like our soul, and then there are things without body. So like we're body and soul, and then there are souls without bodies, and we get to reach out and touch mythology. And then you domesticate it. And you know, then it's it's safer
Mhm.
in a way, but it's not as good. It's not as massive. I don't remember the exact line in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I have it behind me, but I'm not going to bore you as I scroll through it. But it's where they're talking about Aslan, and Mr. Beaver is saying, of course he's not safe, but he's good. And it's like,
Yeah, that's a
that's
great.
with every good thing. Well, no, it's not safe. It's not safe to write a book. Again, you pour your soul out, you waste all your time on these words on a screen, and it's like it's like, and then you send it, and either maybe not a whole bunch of people see it, or maybe you get the worst luck and a couple people who do read it, they don't like it, whatever. It's not safe. There's nothing, but it's amazing. It's this massive, miraculous, powerful thing that you did. And so I just think it's sad when you domesticate something so much that it becomes like demure and small, and it loses its luster.
Thanks for coming to your TED Talk. That's great. That was great. Mary, what did you think? What do you think about that?
I was thinking about, I guess Ed was just like when you domesticate something, it's so that you can make it to serve you, and so it'll be useful to you.
Mhm.
And so when he says that we domesticated myth, it just seems so sad to me to think it that way, because then it's saying that a myth is only around to be useful to us, and that
Yeah.
is really wrong and kind of upside down. Um, it's not just there to like express like what we think is good or bad. It's like, especially if we're thinking of it as coming from outside of us, then domesticating it would kind of just completely ruin it. I don't even know how you could really domesticate myth. It wouldn't be myth anymore.
Mm.
Mhm.
It becomes something else. I don't know, like a fable maybe.
Mhm.
A
like
rom-com.
um, yeah, well, it would definitely diminish it so much. Yeah, shrink it down so that I guess it wouldn't even be useful anymore. Because I guess if a myth, I just you can't just make it. It can't just be domesticated. It can't just be a useful thing. It's got to be wild, or it's just not. Yeah, I don't know what's the purpose of it then.
Yeah, it's not itself, right? When you
Mm.
I really like that turn of phrase you said. We make myth to serve us and our needs. So domesticating it is to, well, like you said, Gabby, to make it safe, to make it predictable, um, so it doesn't hurt anybody. And then you think about the function of myth, which is to define and guide human behavior. And you're like, you put that in a neat little box so that it is safe and predictable, and you can control it and you can make it do what you need it to do. It's like, well, it's like, honestly, what good is it? Makes me think of that quote. Somebody asked Flannery O'Connor, and she says, they asked her, "Do you think the Eucharist is just a symbol?" And she's like, "Well, if it's just a symbol, then to hell with it. What good is it to me in my life if it's just something I can mentally assent? It has some metaphorical, conceptual value." She's like, "No, no, no. This thing needs to, it's real, or I don't care." Um, I feel very much the same way about myth, although I confess I don't know what to do about it all. Um, but I have that same, there's got to be a bit more of a space of reverence. Otherwise, what you do get, I think, by domesticating it is you get myth that becomes coping mechanisms or crutches. I think you did mention rom-coms, which they're not
I did.
always bad, and they can be very fun.
Yes.
But the question is a rom-com, shall we say, inducting you or introducing you into the wildness and the glory of what romance actually is or can be, and what it calls you to change in yourself or to level up to become a greater thing than just the thing that you are, to take on more of what creation is, something like that, right? We're frankly talking about religious language here, religious kind of sounding concepts. And if we take myth the way that he's defining it as, it's something that emerges from Wolferland, it comes from the land of fairy, it comes from the imaginal, from the realm of angels, then of course, especially if it's good, we are talking about something that's kind of like an enzyme, right? There's a guy named Valentin Tomberg who talks about these ideas that come to us, almost mythical, archetypal ideas that come to us from, angelic progeny. And he's like, we take them in and they're like enzymes. They go to work in us. They themselves aren't like exactly the thing that we try to model and become. It's like food. You take them in and then it goes to work in you while you're not paying attention. And then you wake up 10 years later and realize, I'm a different person than who I was. How did that happen? I died somewhere along the way, and this new me kind of came into being, and I was changed partly because I accepted the invite that this idea, this reality, this myth, has for me. There's many ways this conversation can go. Any other thoughts that you have on that, and then we'll go to the last selection.
I guess I have two thoughts. Now, the first one is, now I feel challenged to write a mythical rom-com.
Yes.
I really like to see what that would look like. Maybe Princess Bride or something.
Yeah.
But there is a mythical rom-com that might be it. But I also like what you said about how a part of us can die. It has to die before it can come to a new part. I feel like that's happened to me a few different times in my life where I get to a point where I just feel like I cannot go any further. I've done everything I can. I'm just going right up against the wall, and like it seems like there's no way out. But then that's when God usually reveals something completely new to me. Like that's how I felt right before I left the convent and and realized, oh, I was supposed to get married. And it happened to me recently too, where that death, which we feel so hard that we experience in us, it always is like about to burst forth into like a new form of life. We have to kind of let the old self die to get to there, to the new step. It's like the price that you pay to keep growing.
Yeah, that's great. All right, let's go through the last little selection here. All right, so we are basically at the end of the book. We are trying to find a selection that would kind of tee us off or kick off the end of the book. So in the early morning, so I think he's reached Christmas Day, 101 day vigil is over. He's just endured a cataract of storytelling and visions and thoughts, and he's just a shambling mess of trying to put himself back together by the end of this book. All right, and then he says, in the early morning, I find I have something in me that wasn't there before. Something is in me like a mineral, or a splint of bison bone, or a spirit light. It is these words: inhabit the time and genesis of your original home. At the end of all this, I realize our calling songs, and when he says calling songs, I think what he means are the stories that speak deeply to us, the specific songs that just kind of break you apart and leave you in tears and you don't know why. There are things that call to you that you didn't ask for. They're just in you, in your bones. At the end of this, I realize our calling songs are trying to call us back to ourselves, to our naturalness. They are a spell to break spells. They are a great returning. This is a great returning. They're a beautiful arrow piercing our body to help us remember. When I get up and walk from this ceremony, I am to be my original home. When I speak the music of that place. When I call in the time signature of that place. Not a distortion or facsimile, but real time, real home. Ultimate naturalness, a den of beautiful learning. It's how the gods intended us to live. The salmon moves through deep waters to its source. The wolf howl is the most pristine sound in all creation. That howl is morning has broken, night has crested. We exist. We live. Maybe this is the fat in the bear's paw that helps us remember. Maybe this is where riding the back of the wolf is taking us. Maybe this is crane woman knowledge. Maybe this is flower of the mountain knowledge. These 9 words were worth 101 days. Inhabit the time and genesis of your original home. Mary, I gotta ask you, what are you thinking?
I love it. I want to go home too. Martin Shaw, take me there. But I love that. I feel like this doesn't just happen like for Martin Shaw. He feels like he has gone there from going off for 101 days, but I bet he's going to feel that even more the longer he lives and the more he practices this like awareness of himself. Like it's a constantly opening up to a greater reality. I think of like the wedding at Cana when it says, "You have saved the best wine till now." That what we know now about ourselves, about God, and about our world is only a small bit, and then the longer we live and the more we experience things, the more we love, and the more we kind of come in touch with our inner self or inner wolf, inner soul, um, the greater things that we'll see. Um, and he calls it Genesis, so it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gabi, what do you think?
Can you read those last 9 words again so I get this right? Because I had a thought, but I would like to hear those.
It says, inhabit the time and genesis of your original home.
Okay. I was thinking that our original home is that wolf. Our home is us truly alive, wherever we are. Because, he went into the fort or the woods, wherever he is, the cabin, for 101 days. And that was like a purge, like a detox to get the thorns around the castle to like, get away. I don't need to think about that. I need to connect with the witch inside me who's going to teach me to be fully alive, and the sleeping girl who is his soul. And then, once 101 days is done, once the girl has woken up, and then what did it say? That when the prince comes and kisses her, he's going to be the one that wakes up. So then he can go back to his home, back to the city, wherever he lives. And that inner wolf, that sleeping girl now awake, that wolf fully alive, that's going to follow him. That is him wherever he may be. So that homeness is just us fully alive, is the impression I got.
That's great. Yeah, I have a hard time formulating my thoughts around this one because there's a lot in it. I struggle partly with this in many ways because I'm very unrooted in that I've traveled all over the world. For me, I was born in New Zealand, raised in Australia. I studied in Fiji and France, and then I've now lived in the United States. And then I've traveled a couple of times, like to Brazil and back to Australia. I'm almost now reaching the longest time I've spent in one country, which is the United States. But even here, every 2 years I've traveled to a different state almost. So I don't feel that I have the roots that, like what he's trying to do, walk into his backyard and to become the oracle, the mouthpiece for what is real and deep and true in that area. Okay, I recognize that's his specific charism. I have maybe a different one. Maybe the challenge of my life is to figure out how to get in touch with that stuff even when I have no roots. And maybe there's, kind of like those chia pets that kind of snake out roots out the side of the thing and out the side window and finally find the earth, and it's just like, how could you have ever figured that out? And they do, I don't know. Have you ever had this experience sometimes when you're having a dream, right? You get into a dream and all of a sudden you're just there and there's no context. Nobody teed you up and prepared you for this situation. You're just in it. You understand it. You know what's going on. It's just so all of a sudden so clear. I remember I don't even remember what the dream scene was. What I remembered was my reaction in the moment, thinking, turning all of this into a story environment to try to communicate this experience to somebody else is such a drag, because you got to spend 10,000 words trying to recapture what I'm intuiting all at once in this thing. It's like I started to feel Saint John John the Evangelist's agony trying to write the apocalypse, right? He's just getting all of this in like 1.5 seconds, and he has to spend 1,500 words trying to communicate it and still sort of not getting it right because, as we'll get into next week, Tolkien says, I will say the boy drove over the hill, and everybody will see a different hill in their mind. You're not seeing literally my hill, the one I am seeing. And I remember very clearly in the dream thinking, I wish that it was some way I could bring other people straight into this dream and have them instantly intuit what I want them to see and understand. But I can't. And so we use all of this other stuff that we do to try to, communicate what we're thinking. So it's funny for me where he says, inhabit the time and genesis of your original home. I don't actually know what that is because it's not actually the different places I've lived. I do find I have a specific calling to, it might be Britain, it might be like parts of Scotland. There may be some songs in my DNA or in my, deep in my core or something that connects me to that. It feels mostly like home, but I don't know if I'm just an Anglophile because I grew up and I just, with those influences and I love them. But there's something about those stories that I can't get around. And that's why this book speaks in a very singular way. In comparison, we've got a member in our community who has a love for small town folk tales and wild tales. And she's an amazing person. And she does not necessarily pick up, Robin Hood and King Arthur the same way that I do, with the same love that I do. She's like, I love these, maybe I'm speaking out of turn for her, the dusty hometowns of rural America, with everything that's wild and spiritually deep and just everything about that. See, I look at that and I'm like, that's really cool. But I'm on the outside looking in at a beautiful thing. I don't have that internal lived sense that she does for that place. And so if I were to try to think, after all the experiences I've so far had, where does my soul feel like is home? Well, it's somewhere in Britain somehow. And then I'm like, I don't know what to even do with that. So it's maybe not a surprise that the first novel that I've written is set there, and it's about rediscovering a Wolferland in there. And maybe the time and genesis of your original home, maybe it's not just the actual physical embodied place, although that is pretty vitally important because we're physical embodied human incarnated beings. But the thing that is being embodied in that place, we would call it epigenetics, right? You've got your genetic code, and then you've got your epigenetics, which is the thing you can't put under a microscope, which nobody can get away from, which is the thing that informs the blueprints to be what they are and stay what they are. But epigenetics are not printed in anything. They're just, well, as non-materialists, we have a little bit of a sense of, the realm that they live in. They're in the realm sitting above matter. They inform matter. They make sense of matter. So the thing that sort of informs Britain, the epigenetics of the British, the soul of what it means to be that, all of this wild stuff that we're talking here. Well, you don't have to physically travel there. You can contemplate, you can act, you can sort of live out, you can dream. As writers, we can you enter into that skull, you enter into that BardSkull, that mental space, that soul space, which is not bound by time and it's not bound by space because it's not outside of it. It sits above it. It sits alongside it. It's got a bit more of eternity in it, as opposed to where we have a lot more time. That's where that's why he calls Wolferland. You don't need to travel there. You can just turn left and fall into it by accident. And I think that's what stories end up being sometimes, like a doorway, like you don't realize you suddenly stuck your head into, and you're enchanted by it all. You can't let it go. Wrapping up, ladies, what do you think? Does anything resonate with you in that?
Well, I guess you'll have to be like me, Dominic, because I am 100% Polish, like genetically, but I sure am Scottish by desire. So, so.
Isn't that funny?
Mhm.
Wow. All right. Well, what we plan to do, friends, next week. Well, first of all, we hope that you've enjoyed these series of conversations. You are absolutely welcome to drop a comment for something that you would like us to bring up in the next conversation. What we will do next week is we're going to start Tolkien's famous article on fairy stories. We're going to read a couple of selections. Hopefully, another mentor from our community will join us. And everybody knows and loves Tolkien. I kind of didn't want to start with him because everybody sort of defaults to that. I wanted to start with Merlin, start with Gandalf, somebody a bit more like that. And now let's get into Tolkien. And I'm very curious to see where our conversations go with a bit of a BardSkull, groundwork, prep work. Like we've broken the ice to try to get into the deeper things a little bit here. Tolkien in many ways is very prim and very proper, and he's more the polished side of how to engage with literature, whereas Martin is like the gut and gristle of the wild man. And it all valid, but from just different standpoints. So I think we're going to have fun with that one, and I think more people will also probably like to get into it, and maybe they'll come back and watch some of these conversations. But any thoughts as we close out? Any words of advice to authors and so on after having burned through this book? There's so much more in it, all of the stories that we just couldn't read. Any final thoughts for legends in our community or people who want to write? Gabi, I'll pick you first.
Let out the wolf. I mean, that stuff burning inside you. Let it come out. Explore it. Give it to God. He can make anything good.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say, Gabriella.
Fantastic. And I think that's maybe why we say, let the lore be with you, because it's not just something you make up. It's something that can emerge and meet you. I like to think of Christ as Lord of lore and legend.
Amen.
And so we're all about legend fiction. All right. May the Lord be with you, friends. Catch you next week. This is the way.